L, 68 years old, living in the quiet town of Cedar Grove, Wisconsin. I am a widow, having lost my husband over 2 decades ago, and for most of my life, I devoted myself entirely to my family and my work as a community center coordinator. That job was more than just a career. It was a place where I felt needed, appreciated, and useful. I could connect with people of all ages, from energetic children attending after school programs to seniors seeking companionship and guidance. I have 2 children who have always been the center of my world: my son, Lucas Mitchell, 36, and my daughter, Maya Mitchell, 34. I watched them grow from curious, mischievous children into ambitious young adults. I guided them through school, supported their extracurricular activities, and offered advice when asked. I never imagined that one day they might see me not as a mother, but as a burden. Life in Cedar Grove was peaceful and predictable. The streets were lined with maple trees that turned fiery red every fall, and neighbors often stopped by for a quick chat or a slice of pie I had baked. I loved these small rituals, greeting familiar faces, helping with events at the community center, and occasionally baking treats for my children when they visited. It was a life built around service, love, and quiet dedication. Yet beneath this calm exterior, I carried a quiet worry. I wondered, not unreasonably, if my children were starting to see me differently as I grew older. Could my age, my reliance on them for small things, or my constant concern for their well-being somehow become a source of frustration? I brushed these thoughts aside, convincing myself that family bonds were strong enough to weather anything. I never anticipated the storm that was about to hit my life. Little did I know that one phone call would shake the foundation of everything I believed about my role in my children's lives. My heart, which had carried love and patience for decades, was about to be tested in a way I had never imagined. That moment would mark the beginning of a journey that would push me to the edge of despair, force me to confront betrayal, and ultimately guide me toward a path of self-discovery and empowerment. My daily life was simple, but filled with small joys. Mornings began with the soft light of dawn spilling into my kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the crisp Wisconsin air. I would water my garden, tending to roses and hydrangeas that had been part of my home for decades, each bloom carrying memories of my husband and children. The act of caring for something living, nurturing it, gave me a sense of purpose, a way to start each day on a positive note. After breakfast, I walked the short distance to the community center, greeting everyone with a warm smile. Children running through the hallways would shout my name, calling me Grandma Gloria, though I was their mentor, not their grandmother. Seniors would sit together for craft sessions, knitting or painting, occasionally sharing stories from their own lives. I guided them patiently, offering encouragement, celebrating small successes, and listening when they needed a sympathetic ear. These interactions were my lifeline, a daily reminder that even as I aged, I could still make a meaningful impact. Evenings were reserved for my children. I would call Lucas or Maya, catching up on their lives, listening to their achievements and frustrations. We would talk about work, personal challenges, and sometimes even their friends or partners. I always listened more than I spoke, knowing they valued my advice, but also recognizing they needed space to grow independently. It was in these conversations that I felt most connected to them, a thread linking our separate worlds together. Despite the apparent calm, I often felt an undercurrent of anxiety. Sometimes I caught myself worrying if I was becoming irrelevant, if my guidance was too much, or if my presence was seen as intrusive. I feared that one day my love and care might be interpreted as meddling, but I never shared these fears. I carried them quietly, convincing myself that my children knew my intentions were always good. I believed that life was predictable, that love and patience could overcome misunderstandings. The town, the community center, and my family had always been my pillars of stability. I never imagined that these same pillars could be shaken by a single moment. one phone call that would redefine how I saw myself and my relationship with the two people I had raised with so much care. It all began on a seemingly ordinary afternoon. I had just returned from the community centre, tired but content. My hands carrying the faint smell of paint and flour from the day's activities, I picked up the phone to call Lucas, eager to hear about his week. But the moment he answered, the words he spoke cut deeper than any wound I had ever known. "Mom, old woman, live your own life!" Lucas shouted, his voice sharp and angry. The words struck me like a physical blow. I froze, gripping the phone tightly, unsure if I had heard correctly. The son who once clung to my hand as a child, the boy I had stayed up late worrying about when he was sick, was now shouting at me, dismissing my existence as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience. I tried to speak, to explain that I only wanted the best for him, that my intentions had always been to support, guide, and protect. But he was relentless. Every sentence was a reminder that, in his eyes, I was no longer a mother, but a burden, someone he wanted removed from the daily rhythm of his life. The impact was immediate. My heart raced, my vision blurred with tears I refused to shed in front of him. I had lived my life giving everything to my children, sacrificing my time, energy, and even personal ambitions for them, and now this? This was the moment I realized that love, no matter how deep, could be misunderstood, rejected, and even resented. I ended the call quietly, more in shock than defiance. Sitting alone in my living room, I tried to make sense of it. Had I failed somewhere? Had my care crossed a line that I had never noticed? The house, once filled with warmth and the distant laughter of my children, now felt cold and echoing. I understood in that moment that my journey of love and patience was about to face its most difficult test, yet later that evening, Maya came over, her expression hesitant and conflicted. I sensed she carried a burden she had been avoiding. As soon as she sat down, she admitted quietly, "Mum, Lucas borrowed money from you again, and he hasn't paid it back. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure how you'd feel." Her words hit me with a strange mix of sadness and disbelief. Money had never been the issue. It was the trust and honesty that mattered. The fact that both of my children had kept things from me, had acted in secrecy, made my heart ache. Maya tried to soften it, saying she and Lucas felt overwhelmed by my expectations, by the constant love and attention I gave. It was as if a veil had lifted, revealing cracks in the foundation of our relationship. The children I had nurtured and guided now saw my care as pressure, my concern as interference. For decades, I had been their constant, the person they could always rely on. And yet, here I was, realizing that they felt trapped or resentful of my very presence. Maya's confession was painful, but it was also a necessary revelation. It forced me to confront the uncomfortable truth. My children were no longer children, and my role as their mother was evolving in ways I had never anticipated. I had to acknowledge that my love, as boundless as it was, might no longer be received in the way I had always hoped. We sat in silence for a long moment, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the guilt and fear that she carried for not being completely honest, and I felt the first real pang of isolation, the realization that even love from one's own children could carry a weight of misunderstanding. Days later, I discovered another layer to the story. Lucas had lied about his new promotion, telling me he had a promising new role with higher pay. In reality, he had taken a part-time job at a small cafe, earning barely enough to cover his expenses. The revelation was a punch to the gut. What hurt even more was knowing that Maya had been aware of this and had chosen not to tell me. She had remained silent, perhaps to protect him, perhaps to shield me from worry, but the effect was the same. A feeling of betrayal. The trust I had placed in both of them, trust built over decades, now felt fragile, like a vase teetering on the edge of a table. I found myself questioning everything I had believed about my role in their lives. Had I been too controlling? Too present? Or had I simply been the victim of circumstances I could never control? These questions circled in my mind, leaving me sleepless at night. It was clear now that my love, my guidance, and my sacrifices had been taken for granted, misunderstood, or even resented. I felt a sharp sting of loneliness and despair. For the first time in my life, I realized that I could not depend on my children to validate my worth, that I would have to find my own path forward, regardless of how they perceived me. That evening, the tension in our home reached its peak. Lucas and Maya came over, their expressions a mixture of frustration and unresolved guilt. I had hoped we could talk calmly, but it quickly became clear that calm was no longer an option. As soon as they stepped inside, the air felt heavy, charged with emotions I had not anticipated. Lucas started, his voice sharp and cutting. "Mum, you interfere too much. You don't understand that we need to make our own decisions." His words felt like shards of glass, striking my heart. I opened my mouth to respond, to explain that my concern was only because I loved them, but he didn't pause to listen. Maya joined in, softer but no less hurtful. "We feel guilty all the time, Mom. Your constant worrying makes us feel trapped." I sank into the armchair, feeling a wave of helplessness wash over me. Every word they said seemed to chip away at the foundation of the life I had built for them. I remembered the countless nights I stayed awake, worrying about school projects, college applications, and eventually their jobs and relationships. I had poured my energy into raising them, protecting them, and guiding them toward a future I believed in. And now, it seemed all of that care was being misinterpreted as control or interference. The room became a whirlwind of accusations and defenses. Lucas accused me of not trusting them, while Maya said I never listened. I tried to speak, to remind them of the sacrifices I had made, the countless times I put their needs above my own, but it felt futile. Each word I said was met with resistance, their emotions too raw to hear the truth. I realized that love alone wasn't enough. My intentions, however pure, could not bridge the gap that had grown between us. I felt an unfamiliar ache, the painful awareness that my children, the very people I had devoted my life to, now viewed me as an obstacle rather than a source of support. That night, I went to bed exhausted, heart heavy, and questioning everything I had believed about family and unconditional love. The following nights were the hardest. I lay awake in my bedroom, staring at the ceiling, questioning myself. Had I done something wrong? Was my presence a burden to my own children? These thoughts gnawed at me, each one more painful than the last. I had always believed that love, patience, and guidance would be enough. But now I wondered if I had misjudged everything. Loneliness wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. The walls of my house, once warm and comforting, now felt oppressive. I missed the laughter of my children, their earlier gratitude, and even the small frustrations that once seemed insignificant. I realized that for the first time, I had no one to validate my worth or remind me that my life had meaning. During the day, I tried to focus on the community center, the garden, and small tasks that kept me busy, but in the quiet moments, the doubts returned. I felt a deep ache in my chest, an almost physical reminder of the betrayal I had experienced. Even my friends noticed my silence. Mrs. Harper, a fellow volunteer, asked gently, "Gloria, are you all right?" I forced a smile, hiding the turmoil that churned within. I understood then that self-worth could not rely solely on the validation of others, not even children. I had given so much of myself that I had neglected my own needs, my own happiness. For the first time, I realized that if I wanted to survive this emotional storm, I would need to find strength from within. I needed to rebuild my sense of purpose, my sense of self, independent of how my children saw me. One rainy evening, as I was driving home from the community center, the unthinkable happened. The brakes on my car failed unexpectedly, and panic surged through me as I tried to control the vehicle. Rain splattered across the windshield, reducing visibility to almost nothing. A cyclist appeared in the distance, forcing me to swerve violently. The car flipped once, the world spinning into darkness, and then came a sudden, crushing impact. I woke up in the hospital, my body aching in ways I had never experienced. My wrist was fractured, ribs bruised, and I was unable to walk without assistance. The fear and shock of the accident lingered, mingling with the emotional pain I already carried. I realized how fragile life could be, how quickly everything familiar and comforting could be stripped away. The accident forced me into a new reality. I was now physically dependent, confined to a hospital bed and later to my home, struggling with mobility. For a woman who had always been active and self-reliant, this sudden vulnerability was terrifying. Every movement caused pain. Every attempt at independence felt like a reminder of how life had changed in an instant. Lucas and Maya visited me in the hospital, but their presence felt heavy and reluctant. Lucas looked at me with a mixture of guilt and impatience. "Mum, you should have been more careful," he said flatly. No warmth, no apology, just a reminder that I had somehow failed. Even in misfortune, Maya's eyes were downcast. She seemed uncomfortable, unsure how to navigate the tension that had built over months. I lay there, surrounded by sterile walls and the quiet beeping of monitors, feeling the depth of their emotional distance. The children I had loved, guided, and sacrificed for seemed to have transformed into strangers. I realized that their visits, though necessary, could not heal the emotional chasm that had formed. I felt isolated, not just physically, but emotionally, understanding that my path toward healing would have to begin with me, not them. The hospital stay gave me time to reflect on my life, my choices, and the realization that I could no longer rely on external validation for my sense of worth. I needed to reclaim my life, my purpose, and my identity, independently of my children's opinions or approval. It was a painful awakening, but a necessary one. After weeks of recovery, I returned home determined to reclaim my life. I decided to focus on myself, not as a mother or caretaker, but as Gloria Mitchell, a woman with her own dreams and purpose. I joined a senior art collective, leading painting workshops and volunteering at local events. Every brushstroke, every class I taught, reminded me that I still had value, that I could still inspire and guide others without losing myself. This decision transformed my life. I felt alive again, energized by the creativity and engagement with others. For the first time in years, I understood that happiness could come from within, and that my role as a mother, while important, was only one part of my identity. My children's distance no longer defined my worth. I had found purpose and community on my own terms. After immersing myself in the senior art collective, I discovered a side of life I had almost forgotten. Teaching painting workshops was more than just a hobby. It became my calling. Each morning, I arrived at the community hall, greeted by the bright smiles of seniors eager to learn, eager to create something beautiful. Their enthusiasm reminded me of the days when I had been surrounded by my children's curiosity and joy. I guided their brushstrokes, celebrated their successes, and offered encouragement when they felt frustrated. Watching someone create a masterpiece from a blank canvas was profoundly fulfilling. For the first time in decades, I felt that my presence mattered not just to my children, but to an entire community. I realized that my value didn't depend on being needed at home, but on what I could give to the world with my skills, my patience, and my heart. Evenings were now filled with a sense of accomplishment rather than longing or regret. I kept a journal, documenting each workshop, the laughter, the little victories. I attended local community events, shared my work, and volunteered for causes I had once only dreamed of supporting. Slowly, the weight of loneliness began to lift, replaced by a sense of independence I hadn't experienced since my youth. I understood then that self-fulfillment was not a luxury. It was a necessity. My children's misunderstandings, their anger, and even their betrayal could not diminish the life I had yet to live. I finally felt empowered, strong, and capable of building joy on my own terms. This sense of purpose became the foundation of my transformation, a lifeline that carried me through the emotional scars of the past. Over the following weeks, Lucas and Maya began noticing the changes in me. They saw my posts on social media, pictures of workshops, and videos of seniors proudly displaying their artwork under my guidance. Maya was the first to reach out, her voice softer, tinged with hesitation and remorse. "Mum, we underestimated you," she admitted during a phone call. "We didn't realize how strong and inspiring you've always been." Her words stirred a mix of relief and pride. I could sense that Lucas was observing too, though he remained quiet. There was a shift, subtle but undeniable, a recognition that I was no longer the woman they could dismiss or belittle. My confidence, my independence, and my dedication to helping others demanded respect. This recognition didn't erase the past, but it provided a moment of connection, a bridge toward reconciliation. I realized that children, even adults, often fail to see their parents' full capacity until faced with undeniable evidence. It was not about proving them wrong, but about living authentically, so that the truth of one's worth could no longer be ignored. I began to sense that their attitudes were softening, that the resentment and frustration had not entirely vanished, but were being replaced with a reluctant admiration. Seeing them witness my growth was validating, yet I knew my happiness could no longer be tied to their approval. My life, my choices, and my purpose were mine alone. After some reflection, I decided to express my feelings in writing. I wrote a letter to Lucas and Maya, pouring my heart onto the page. "I won't shrink myself for anyone. I raised you to stand tall. Now I will too. My love for you remains, but I refuse to live in silence, doubt, or resentment. I am proud of myself, and I hope you will learn to respect and honor your own lives as I have learned to honor mine." Sending the letter was both cathartic and empowering. It symbolized a release of the burden I had carried for so long, the weight of expectations, the pain of misunderstanding, and the fear of losing my place in my own family. For the first time, I felt completely honest, completely free, and completely alive. The letter also opened a door for dialogue. Maya responded with warmth, expressing remorse and a desire to rebuild trust. Lucas remained silent initially, but his demeanor changed gradually. His eyes reflected acknowledgement, a recognition that I had stepped into a life of dignity and independence that could not be dismissed. Through this journey, I learned that life doesn't end with age, and love alone is not a measure of self-worth. Respect for oneself, pursuit of purpose, and courage to stand independently are essential for happiness. Family love is precious, but it cannot define the entirety of one's existence. I realized that moments of betrayal, misunderstanding, and disappointment are part of life's lessons, shaping resilience and teaching the importance of boundaries. Strength is not about controlling others, but about embracing one's own power to create meaning and fulfillment, even in the face of rejection. This understanding transformed me. I felt lighter, more confident, and more capable of navigating life with a sense of pride and authenticity. I had found my voice, my space, and my peace. Lessons I hope others can embrace, regardless of age or circumstance.